All right, welcome to the Ultra High Net Worth Clients Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Broadhead. We started this podcast as a way to create a central resource of the best financial advisor practice growing tips shared by the most outstanding advisors in the industry, of which our guest today is definitely one. These outstanding financial advisors agree to be on the show and provide a ton of value for free, all in the hopes that our audience might learn from their words. My father was a financial advisor, and financial advisors are the main clients we serve. So, my marketing agency's mission is to help every financial advisor grow their business in an effort to help the world become more financially secure. Today, we have the rare pleasure of talking with an incredible financial advisor, Dan Beck. Dan, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. And I'm actually not a financial advisor, but I
Sorry, I
work with a
should've
lot of them,
specified.
and I'm definitely in the industry. So,
Mhm.
really proud. So I'm currently the CEO and one of the co-founders of 401 Go. We are a 401k, fintech solution.
Mhm.
The unique thing about us is really from day one, we wanted to keep advisors central to what it is we're doing. We felt that was going to be deliver the best outcomes, having both a high tech as well as a high touch approach to just the challenges that somebody who's just starting out on that journey of personal finance, or even somebody that's later, stage, maybe approaching kind of the decumulation stage of life, just provide them with those optimal solutions. And so, I've always, I had a very blue collar upbringing, and kind of had to learn personal finance on my own and in college, and always felt that that was something that wasn't being taught enough. And it was something where, prior companies, my brother, who was one of the other co-founders, he and I, we built a number of businesses, prior to 401 Go, and we tried to set up a 401k for our employees just because we saw, hey, this is probably a great way to help them, think a little bit more about their finances. And we just couldn't find any solutions. And so, like any, entrepreneur, we decided to build it. So that's where, that's how I got, in over my head when it comes to, these financial
Yeah.
services.
Oh, that's awesome. So much to unpack there. Can you tell us about your entrepreneurial journey? How you got started as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So my first career, if you will, I did about 7 years, as a TV producer. Had kind of a marketing agency as well. I did everything from SEO before it was called SEO to web development, and just kind of that new digital marketing, frontier that was kind of emerging as I was starting my career. Did that for a few years, and then just kind of burned out, hit creative burnout, and realized that I had a knack for selling things and taking ideas and bringing them to fruition. And that was what I was doing for a lot of the clients that I had, and decided to try it for myself. And, some of the first products that I, focused on were in the outdoor sporting goods industry. And so, over the next 10 or so years, built over a dozen different companies. At one point we had a consultancy in China, with an office there with about 15 or 20 employees. And, was doing a lot of kind of cross-border stuff. But mostly consumer products. Those were the prior businesses. I did try a food truck and failed. It was a lot of fun, but I realized, it's not something I should probably be in. But most of the other businesses were quite successful. And I had a number of exits that, really gave us the fuel to start 401 Go. This is the first time with 401 Go, we are venture backed, just given, the unit economics going after those small 401k plans that, most 401k specialists, tend to, shy away from. We need to have a certain level of scale. And so it was, a necessity that we went and, got some venture backing. But for the first few years, we kind of fueled it with, just money that we had, gotten from other investments and the sale of other businesses.
Mhm. Wow. Um, so, how did you go from blue collar to entrepreneur? How did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur and you had what it takes to, have so many successful exits?
I joke that in some ways it's because I was very lazy. So I figured out really quick how to convince other people to, take some of my ideas and bring them to market. But, I certainly work hard. I love to work. I think more than anything, the true answer is it's curiosity.
Mhm.
It's just that to me, that was the best way to marry, kind of a career as well as just that drive to just learn as much as I possibly could. And that's really why I started, so many different businesses is out of a desire to really understand, everything from like distribution and overseas manufacturing. So every business was almost kind of a new learning opportunity. And so a lot of it really just came from that drive and that curiosity. And then, the kind of the business aspects I learned, just through doing. I was a 10-year college student because I would change majors, switch schools, drop out to go and do some really cool, fun, amazing things. But then I finally did get a degree, through School of Business at the University of Utah, that, really kind of helped solidify a lot of the knowledge that I'd already kind of, started to accumulate at that time in terms of like running a business. And I think accounting especially is super important to understand. It's the language of business. Our investors that we have currently, it's I'm kind of a marketer at my core, and so naturally I lean more towards like a qualitative description and speaking with like vision and everything else. But you find when you're working with investors, it's all about numbers, and you've got to speak their language. And so having just those accounting fundamentals are pretty necessary. But then really everything else I felt like I just kind of learned through doing. And that's just the way that I learn. Like it's not enough to read an article or study something. Like I've got to do it myself. And so that's really the way that I've approached, my entrepreneurial journey.
Mhm. That's awesome. So, in addition to curiosity, how do you determine if an idea for a business is worth pursuing?
What I try to find very quickly, and some of the time accounting's important, and especially with kind of like that first venture where there's a lot on the line. Further along when you've got multiple things, you got multiple irons in the fire. I think you can get a little bit more. You can experiment a little bit more with different ideas, but early on, I really put a big focus on risk mitigation. And so before I jumped into a business, I would try to, do a pretty good, some thorough research to understand, is there truly a market opportunity? And then build some assumptions. So, for example, we released kind of a brand new, water filtration product that was really designed for all sorts of outdoor use. And, I spent probably, you know, well over 100 grand, just kind of researching the idea. And quite frankly, one of the ways that I figured it out was by buying other people's water filters and selling them and seeing what sort of, feedback I got from the customers. And so, for me, it's about kind of establishing a thesis or a hypothesis of what, you're intending to do with that product or service or whatever it is. And then test that as quickly and as efficiently and as low cost as you possibly can. And that might mean, selling someone else's product at cost just to gather some information. And so that's always been the focus, is really, and even before jumping into the 401k business, my brother and I probably spent a year and a half really researching it, looking at the alternatives, trying to figure out like why is it hard for a small business owner to offer this as a benefit? So we spent a lot of time just researching. And again, that comes back to, just that, those curious roots where naturally I want to know. It's not enough just to have kind of a surface level explanation. I've got to understand, well, why is it that, why is that the case? Why is it hard to get financial advisors or 401k specialists to focus on those SMBs? What are the challenges? How do we overcome those? And so, we do a lot of research, but I can't also, yet at the same time, I think a lot of people, they want to completely de-risk something, and that's just not entrepreneurship. That's not how you start a company. At some point, you've got to put some money and some time on the line. And quite frankly, I'd rather have, tried out an idea or gone down a road to find out that it's truly a dead end than to continue on with life and look back at maybe these roads that I didn't take or these opportunities that I passed up on because I was afraid. And so anybody that, that I come in contact with that talks about entrepreneurship, I'm certainly one that's going to prod them in that direction and, try to help them take that leap, because it's worth it. No matter the outcome, to me, it's worth it. And I've seen that time and time again.
Hey, amen. I always like to refer back to um, Benjamin Franklin's explanation for, he had uh, 10, like 2,000 failed models for, was it the light bulb? Or was that
Yeah, well,
Edison?
that was Edison. Yeah,
That was
but I know,
Edison.
yeah, I know what you're talking about, where it's basically every
Yeah.
time you fell, it's like you learned of a new way to not do it.
Yeah. And he said, like, "I didn't fail. I successfully figured out that wasn't the answer."
Yeah. Exactly. And you can learn from it. I mean, that's the thing too, is every time you do something new, you learn. But that's where you have to have some scientific rigor with kind of those ventures. And so it's the same thing with what we're doing, today. We've got several thousand businesses that are using our platform. And there were, hundreds, if not thousands of, kind of those speculative ventures where it's like, hey, what's going to happen if we do this? But that's really, I feel like there's a lot of talk of disruption,
Mhm.
especially, kind of within like the VC community. Um, and some of the time there's kind of, I believe, disruption just for the sake of disrupting, but not really to understand, is there a better way? And so that's kind of what we're doing. And it certainly shows. So, for example, we felt, hey, we see the value of technology. We see the value of having that human component and those relationships and a financial advisor as a coach. How do we marry those together? And what does that look like? And how do we measure whether we're being successful or not? And so some of the metrics that we looked at are, what are the participation rates? And of interest is certainly, kind of a segment of that working population that's traditionally not been, not participated in, to a high degree within the 401k. So looking at the lower quartile of either age or wage, traditionally participation rates where they have access to a 401k is about 22%. So the question was, can we do better? And the theory or the thesis was, yes, we can, and this is the way that we're going to do it. And today, for us, when we look at that same cohort, our participation rates are more than double the industry average. So we're up about 51%, and that's still not enough. The question now is, how do we get to 100? And I know that that may not be feasible, but we're not going to really explore those upper limits unless we believe that there's still room to grow. Another key metric that we track are, what are average account balances, because for us, we really view the 401k not as kind of the solution. It's the start of a journey. We joke that it's the gateway drug because a lot of our customers or a lot of our clients, these individuals that are working at small businesses, this is their first time saving, period. It's their first time maybe having an account with a financial institution outside of their credit union or bank. And so we're having an impact. And for us, that's really kind of been the focus, is we rethought, what is a 401k? How should it be utilized? And that's kind of that's produced the results that we're seeing today.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and I definitely wanna dig into the creation of 401 Go and how, financial advisors can, benefit from it. But I'm curious, you mentioned doing research and doing testing. Most of my mentors and kinda people I follow on YouTube and Instagram, they're like,
Mhm.
outsource everything you don't have to do. It's like, you need research, outsource that. And I've tried doing that, but they're not researching what I need to be researched for myself to
Mhm.
come up with the right ideas. But, it does take, days, weeks, months, like to your point, years sometimes.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice or tips or tricks on research, to know what you need to do, what can be outsourced, and to make sure you're not, digging a hole to China.
Yeah, and I think some of that really is more dependent on the individual. And so for me, like, I like to do a lot myself, even though I realize I'm not that great at this and this. Like, probably, 95% of the things that I do on any given day, I'm probably definitely not the best person in the company to be doing them. But it's the way that you get close to the problem, and that's really how you understand the pain points, the friction. Where is it we need to focus our attention? And when you're outsourcing some of that initial discovery, I think it's just hard to really to feel the issue. And um, I think some entrepreneurs that come out of, like, maybe you're a financial advisor and you do that for 20 or 30 years, and then you have this incredible idea of ways that you can deliver better outcomes. And you go down that path, the fact that you'd spent a career within like a specific industry focusing on, a set of challenges or whatever gives you tremendous like deep expertise. And I didn't have that. And I haven't had that for, really every business venture. And so a lot of it was more just kind of exposure to some surface level friction or some issues. And, like in our case, it was not being able to offer 401k to our employees, but it didn't stop there. And I felt like if I outsourced that research, I'd come back with, a lot of the same generic answers that you hear oftentimes. And so, by really digging into it ourselves, I think it gave us some very unique perspective. And at the same time, like I know we made mistakes that we probably could have avoided by, having more experts, that we're associated with. And so when we had the idea of starting 401 Go, we knew a lot about technology and automation and, I'd always been kind of a personal finance nerd. So I had, I think a very broad, understanding of kind of the industry and some of the challenges that we were hoping to solve. Um, but we didn't know enough about 401ks in particular and how, the industry is connected and all those, kind of the inner workings. And so we started talking to consultants and we finally, a lot of people said what you're trying to do is impossible, it can't be done. And so finally we brought in somebody, he was working at Transamerica and, his name kept coming up as somebody who knows a lot about the industry. And we said, here's what we're trying to do. And he's like, can't be done. It's impossible. And at that point we were kind of fed up and we're like, can we pay you to tell us why? And after about 2 months of a lot of back and forth with that individual, Jared, he decided to leave his, the corporate world and come to a scrappy startup, which for him was, you know, very scary, very risky. But it was really, I think because my brother and I had an outside perspective, we could ask questions that nobody else had even conceived of. And so I think that really, our kind of outsider view, coupled with some industry expertise, really created what, was the start to a very, what's been a very successful journey so far.
Mhm. That's awesome. So you just kept asking the question until the consultants got so frustrated that they're like, "Dang it, I'm just gonna join your company."
Yeah, yeah.
That's the move right there. You mentioned starting this business with your brother. Did you start the other businesses with your brother as well?
Most of them. There were a few that, I'd kind of started before he kind of set off on the same path that I decided to set off on. And so, I had my first few businesses running while he was in college. He's about 7 years younger than I am. And so when he finally got his degree, he decided to go live in China for about a year and learn Mandarin Chinese. I loved that
Wow.
idea because at the time, I was doing a lot of business in Asia. And so it was just kind of natural that he had, the technical chops. And so as soon as he came back, he was kind of considering, getting a real job. And I convinced him to, come and join me. And we started just building software and systems and everything else to run kind of these big complex e-commerce systems and platforms that we were building.
Yeah. Sounds kind of like Elon Musk and his brother a little
Yeah.
bit. That's awesome. So do you both have kind of clearly delineated roles, or how does that work
We do, and I
typically?
think that was probably the hardest part, starting out is and again, for me as a solo entrepreneur for, I was probably a good 5 years into that journey before he joined me. Um, I was a little bit of everything, and so it was kind of, a jack of all trades, master of none. I was a mile wide, but only an inch deep, and so,
Mhm.
I felt that some of the challenges or the questions or, the focus of, kind of the technical or the code side of things, I thought I had good solutions for that. And some of the time we'd butt heads and I'd be like, no, we should do it this way. And he, no, we should do it that way. But after, a couple of years of that and really just seeing time and time again, him ultimately getting his way in those matters that he's honestly best suited for. Um, we both kind of arrived at the conclusion, hey, my brother Nate, he's really good at this, this, and this. And so, I'll certainly kind of voice my opinion, but at the end of the day, I know he's going to do the right thing. And likewise, and, quite honestly, it's invigorating. And, having built a number of businesses on my own, having a really good partner, somebody that you can trust, somebody that can really complement, maybe your unique skill set is invaluable. just from a satisfaction standpoint. Like I love what I do. I love who I work with. But there's also, we're also a way better company because we do have, it's not, we don't have a lot of shared, skills. And so because of that, it just gives us the ability to see things from a unique challenge versus, maybe a single founder company.
Mhm. That's awesome. Um, yeah, I have a younger brother who I've often, wanted to pull into the fold, but haven't done it, quite yet. He also has a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage, so he's got more to risk than me at this point.
That's hard, and that actually brings up another good point, and this is one thing where I've seen, as I've kind of helped other founders or consulted with, smaller startups, is some of the time it's, especially if you're really talented at something, you can, when you're maybe 25 or something, find yourself in a very high profile position making a lot of money. And the instinct is like, great, now I can go live the high life. But the problem is if you're always, kind of the amount that you're spending and the amount that you're bringing in are pretty close, it really reduces that ability to go out and experiment. And so, by trying to find ways to mitigate risk, one of those is learn to live as frugally as I possibly can. And I paid myself the same, what I think a lot of people would consider a relatively low wage for probably, I mean, it was only like last year that I gave myself a raise. And so I learned how to live on, very little. And because of that, it gives me a lot more opportunity to
Mhm.
experiment. And so for, it's hard to kind of resist that temptation of consumerism and everything else. And, I certainly have, fallen victim to that a number of times. And I joke that in prior companies, really, our focus was getting people to buy stuff they probably didn't really need. And we're making a penance for that now by selling 401k and personal finance. And this is something that people really do need. And so we're kind of
Mhm.
taking what we learned there and trying to apply it here. But really, at the end of the day, yes, I think the best way to be able to experiment is to produce kind of an environment where failure can exist. And that doesn't happen when you're making 200 grand a year and you're spending 190 of that. So you've gotta have a bigger delta in order for you to kind of create that buffer that allows you to take some risk.
Awesome. Can you and we're gonna jump into 401 Go here, shortly, but I'm curious, what are some of your most important failures?
I think it's honestly, for me, it's been outside of business. So I'm married. I have 5 kids. I love being a dad, and in many ways, that was kind of the reason that I pursued this entrepreneurial journey. Is I felt this is the best way that I can kind of create the type of life that I want my kids to have, one where they can be curious and explore. Um, and I got kind of caught up in that mission to the in some ways the detriment of my family. And I remember when I had kind of my first, really big exit, I kind of reached a point where I could have at that point retired and lived comfortably and been able to spend all my time with my family. But at that moment, I kind of, midlife crisis, if you will. I kind of realized, you know what? I always said my motivation for working hard and everything else was for my family, but now I have an opportunity to be with my family the entire time. And I don't know if I want to do that. And so I kind of realized there were some selfish motivations to, which there's nothing wrong with to what I was doing. But it really, caused me to look at that balance that I have between kind of my personal family life and then also work and how I was marrying the two of those and where I was focusing my priorities. And, I'm always pushing and trying to level up in work, but it's really the biggest challenges for me. And there's failures along the way, is really kind of how I prioritized, my mental wellness, the way that I try to find balance, the time that I'm spending with my family. And so I've been doing a lot of course correcting over the last couple of years. And the reason why is it's stressful. It's really hard, and it can be, overwhelming, as I'm sure you know, to start something kind of new and scary and risky. And if you don't have a solid spouse or family and if that personal aspect of your life isn't in balance, everything else is going to be a challenge as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Amen. One of our other clients who is also a personal mentor to me, he says, a good life partner is arguably the biggest uh, life advantage, business advantage you can have. He talks about he was fighting the unions for a long time, and he went to his wife and he's like, we're putting everything into this. We might lose it all and have to go back to, that starter home that we had. She's like, well, whatever, I can make it nice. And so he's like, I couldn't have achieved, and he's a tremendously successful
Mhm.
person. His business does, 200 million revenue per year and up, and we're working on getting into the billions.
Awesome.
He's like, I never could have reached this without my wife.
I
So I
completely agree. I mean, having that support it's invaluable. And some of the time, maybe it isn't a life partner, but if there's somebody like I'm very fortunate that it's my brother, it's my
Mhm,
wife. I've got a number of things that have really kind of enabled me to be able to pursue this dream. And I know I couldn't do it if it wasn't for my life partner, for my wife. And I mean, even my kids, like they're very supportive of dad's crazy ideas. Both in kind of my career as well as the stuff that we do as a family outside of work.
mhm. That's great. Kids getting involved in any of the businesses?
They do, and, and I try to be careful to not, push them into this because, it means a lot to me. It's brought me a lot of joy and satisfaction, but I know, they're all so very different, and I think that's a lot of fun as a parent is exploring just the kind of the diversity, and how unique every child, is.
Mhm,
And so, more than anything, I'm trying to create an environment where, failure is not feared. It's understood, where we can be curious, where we can take risks. And so, they've helped out in, my various businesses. They've, whenever they need some money, they know dad will never give them a dime. They've got to earn it. And so they've been very involved, but I'm at the same time trying to just more than anything show them here are all the different things you can do. And, and I think that's the beauty of our day and age. Um, you know, my parents, they didn't have that luxury in many ways. I think the age of the internet and I know a lot of I think the number one job now I've heard is kids want to be a YouTuber. And it may sound ridiculous, but there's actually I think that especially having a background in kind of like TV and film and seeing how somebody who, maybe you don't have the greatest production abilities or whatever, but if you've got a good idea and people want to hear about it, like you've got an audience now, and you can build that audience. And so the opportunity to pursue, it's yeah, go chase your dreams, but it really should be a dream that you can get paid for. Um, that aligns better now than it ever has before. Before it was like, go find some place, you work hard during work, the 9 to 5, so that you can live outside of that. And to me, I want my 9 to 5 to be just as enjoyable as every other aspect of my life. And I feel like that's possible now more so than ever before because of the technology and just the evolution of where we are today. And I see it as quite exciting for my kids once they kind of reach that age.
mhm. Yeah, amen to that. I started this business in Chicago, and then I moved to Los Angeles during the pandemic, and just two weeks ago, me and my wife moved to Barcelona, Spain. So
No
that's
way. So are you in Spain right now?
yeah,
I
it's
had no idea.
6:30 in the afternoon, 6:30 at night.
That is so cool. See, that to me is the dream. Like after 401 go, my plan is to live on a boat with my family for about a year and just travel and see
Cool.
things. So yeah, I'm super jealous that you're doing that now. That's incredible.
Hey, digital nomad visa.
Mhm.
They want entrepreneurs to come here.
Yeah. I've never been to Barcelona, but I've heard, it's definitely on my bucket list. I've spent quite a bit of time in Europe, but haven't made it to Barcelona. So that's awesome. If I'm out there, I'll be sure to,
Yeah,
say hi.
hit me up.
Mhm.
We got a spare bedroom with your and your family's name on it.
So cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's dig into 401 Go. So it sounds like you shared this a little bit. This was just a problem you had. This
Mhm.
this was an itch. You're like, where? How is there no solution to this? And you did a year and a half of looking for the solution and talked to a ton of consultants who all said it was not possible. And then you just kept asking until they were
Mhm.
like, all right, fine, it's possible, and I'm going to join you.
Yeah, yeah.
What how did you know this was worth your time? This was your next move?
Really, like, I'd love to say that I'm here because it was 99% hard work and 1% luck, but it's probably the inverse of that, honestly. Some of it we certainly the timing couldn't have been better for when we started to jump into this problem. I'd say that when we set out on our journey, I knew that there had to be other businesses, like mine, where they wanted to offer this as a benefit. And so I felt that there was a market opportunity. But seeing the challenges, I had to figure out why is it inaccessible? So you have to really understand the way the industry's pieced together. The role that a third party administrator, a record keeper, a financial advisor, the custodian, how they all work together, what their motivations are, who pays who. And so we had to unravel a very tangled web to kind of arrive at some of the conclusions that we had. We felt that a lot of the issue was around kind of realigning incentives. A lot of financial advisors are compensated predominantly, especially if you're a 401k specialist, on assets. And so, a startup business with, a few employees, or even a larger mid-sized business that's just starting a brand new 401k, it could be several years before there's going to be sizable assets that can be monetized. And so it's hard for advisors to do startup plans or, pursue, those SMBs, such as like the companies that I had. And it's not necessarily a problem with the advisor or a problem with the industry. It's just that, those interests aren't aligned. And so we decided to kind of unravel every piece, and we looked at, how do TPAs, third party administrators, what is it they do and how does that work? And let's understand that industry. What are the software systems they use? And then same thing in the record keeping space. And so we just did, exhaustive research, and we decided there's an opportunity here. We started writing code and built a product. One of my companies was the first one that went on there, and we saw some incredible success with employees. I had, probably about a half dozen or so warehouse workers that were making anywhere from $12 to $15 an hour, and we had 100% participation. One of those employees, he started working for me when he was 16. His dad was my warehouse manager. And then, when he graduated from high school, he went full time. Um, and now he's working for a different business that I have, and he saves, like 40% of his paycheck. He's got, north of 40 grand in his account, and he's, young 20 something. And talking to him, he credits a lot of that to the 401k that we offered. And so
Mhm.
at that moment, we realized, okay, we're on to something. And something that really aligned was there's now a lot of legislative tailwinds. So, for example, if you're an employer in California, as soon as you hire your first employee, you are required to offer some sort of a retirement benefit. And so there are now 17 states that have passed similar legislation, that are in various stages of implementation. And in total, this is impacting more than half of all small to medium sized businesses nationwide. And so it's created this tremendous demand, that's also helped the industry that's largely overlooked this segment of the market to go, maybe there's a problem. Maybe we need to try to find ways to solve for this. And so suddenly we became much more relevant to not just those small businesses looking for a solution, but also the industry that sees a need, sees the demand, and the ability to accumulate, assets through a lot of these smaller, accounts.
That's that's awesome. Uh, so does it actually help encourage employees to sign up for 401ks? Like it helps explain the benefits, or
It
how exactly
does.
does it work?
Yeah, so an employee is 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they have a 401k through their employer than if they don't. And this is really the reason why so many states have been passing this legislation is if somebody gets to, the age of retirement and they're not ready, that there's a social burden to that. It's more costly to help somebody, and so if we can get someone interested in saving for their future, it takes pressure off of the Social Security Administration. It reduces the social burden, and so there's a lot of government reasons why we want individuals to be more to be thinking about their future self at a much earlier stage in life. And so, that's just kind of and I think that's the other thing too, is for us, we looked at what is retirement? And I see what you're doing. And to me, like a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to move to Barcelona when I'm 72 and I retire or whatever, and I'm going to, try to enjoy it. You're doing that now. Like that's this idea. And I
Why
bet you're
wait?
probably one of those who's going to, be doing something up until the day that they die. And so even the very definition of retirement is very different for me than it is for my father, but the products haven't kept up with that trend or those changes. And so we view the 401k as not the end all. It's not, it's just an account. It's just it's a, part of the tax code. And so, really what we're trying to do is leverage it to ignite a desire in an individual at a very early stage in life where they've got, the advantage of a long time horizon. And so that's really been kind of the defining factor. And what we found along the way is, I feel like every advisor that gets into the industry does so because they want to help people. They do have some financial savvy and they want to share that with others. But oftentimes you get caught up in kind of this race of pursuing AUM or, if you're selling commission products or whatever, suddenly some of that alignment and interest can drift. And so for us, it's like, how do we bring it back into alignment? And so that meant we've got to find a better way of developing kind of that back office, the underlying technology and that solution to reduce those costs so that now the advisor can actually make some money pursuing, this segment of the market that needs help. And so for us, it really came down to just how do we get somebody that's 23, that's just starting their career, excited about personal finance. And that's why we didn't start, as a like a competitor to Betterment. Our opinion is there's plenty of solutions out there. The problem is the people that need the help are not seeking those solutions. And that's where the power of the 401k comes in, is we're now reaching, basically anyone and everyone that has the ability to save, they have to have a job. And so it was just a natural start. We've got IRAs, employee turnovers at about 40%, 47% right now. So they're going to be with an employer for an average of 2 years, a little over 2 years. And then when they leave, like we want to roll those assets into an IRA and help them continue saving for retirement. And then eventually get them ready for that time when it does make sense to have a financial advisor, somebody that's just starting out. The process is relatively the same. It's like spend less than you're making. Have some insurance in place, just those basic financial practices. But then once you start to accumulate, let's say, a few $100,000, suddenly you can look at these alternative investments. And that's where having the power of a financial advisor really comes in. And so how do we create that environment where the advisors are getting what they want, what they need, and individuals are getting what they want and they need? And we just decided that the 401k was probably the best place to start.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. And so who is the ideal user of 401 Go? Is it small business owners? Is it financial advisors? Is it
We've really
other folks?
shifted our focus to distributing predominantly through financial advisors.
Mm,
So over 70% of the plans we have on the platform have an advisor attached to them. If somebody comes to us, we do get a lot of direct inbound traffic because of these requirements at the state level. And so there are a lot of individual businesses that come to us, and we try to pair them up with an advisor because we know that delivers the best outcomes. And so we've been very advisor centric, and we've really kind of pivoted to focusing more on how do we get in front of more advisors? How do we show them that there's an opportunity, even if they're not a 401k specialist? And there's in the industry they call them two plan Tonys, and it's oftentimes like a private wealth advisor who's dealing with ultra high net worth clients. And maybe there's a business owner and they say, hey, I could use help with the 401k. Like I can do 401ks, and then they get into it and it's a total nightmare and they hate it. And they're like, well, that's just because it was my first one. And so they do plan number two. And that's just as bad, if maybe even worse than the first one. Like, I'm done. And so, unfortunately, it's caused a lot of advisors to kind of dip their toe in the water, to then turn away from it. And so we're now in this position where we built a platform. We take on a lot of that fiduciary risk and liability. We have a very robust system and platform, and so we remove a lot of that burden away from the advisor. And now those advisors can pursue a market opportunity that was largely out of reach before. And so again, it wasn't necessarily that there's flaws with the motivations or the industry in and of itself. It's the way that everything was pieced together that just didn't work, and we had to realign that. And so that's how we're getting advisors to really pursue these opportunities. And you don't have to be a 401k specialist anymore. As long as your RIA or BD that you're working with will allow you to do 401ks. And the thing we found is we have a lot of relationships with those home offices to where they have enough confidence in what we've built that they will allow those advisors to take on a little bit more fiduciary risk in helping a client with a 401k plan.
Mhm. Awesome. So does it work that, the financial advisor signs up for a platform and then uses it for their clients? Or is it you're finding clients and connecting them with financial advisors?
Right now,
How's
most
it work?
of the business comes from financial advisors that, and most of them are the 401k specialist, where like it's their bread and butter. They don't really necessarily work with individual clients. It's only, institutional assets, um, and they see kind of this emerging opportunity, and they want to have a way of being able to capture some of that market because, every plan at one point was a startup plan. And so they're trying to kind of, use this as building up, but, kind of building up their pipeline and their book of business.
Mm,
So the focus has definitely been on that type of advisor. But like I said, we work with a lot of them, and the benefit of us being referring clients to them is again, it's just kind of realigning those interests. Like we want them to have an advisor involved. It's a better outcomes, service is better, and so but still, yeah, probably 60% of the business that comes in is through advisors that say, "Hey, this is a cool product. I want to offer it to my clients." And then we educate them. We show them what they should be doing. We show them how to build proposals. We've got a lot of tools there to support those advisors.
okay. So it really just it streamlines and simplifies and makes it much, much easier for a financial advisor to offer their clients a 401k services. Am I
Absolutely.
understanding correctly? Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, normally industry averages, it takes about 7 weeks to set up a 401k. And it's because you're
Mhm.
dealing with usually, like, if you go the unbundled approach, you're dealing with a third party administrator, separate custodian, and record keeper. And it's trying to negotiate all of that is what causes a lot of the complexity. That's also what makes it, cost prohibitive. And so we've streamlined all that to where we even have our own RIA, and we can be what's called a 338 fiduciary. So essentially provide that fund line, because a lot of advisors, they're like, "Oh, I'll be the fiduciary on these big multi-million dollar plans, which are my bread and butter, but I don't really want any of that fiduciary exposure on these small plans. I just don't have as much time to dedicate to those." And we understand that. And so that's why, they can lean on our RIA, and we'll be, the primary fiduciary, and they're just a co-fiduciary. So it really reduces the risk, and also speeds it up. So, if you're a financial advisor and you're compensated purely off of assets under management, you're never going to do a startup plan. It takes 7 weeks to set up, and it's going to be years before you can really make any money on it. That's just not that's a losing proposition. And so for us, because we have streamlined everything, we don't have, the $3,000 setup fee for the plan document and all those other costs associated with it. And so we're about 60% less expensive to that business, which means the advisor can now charge, some flat fees to help set up a 401k so they can monetize, a segment of the market that they've never been able to before, and use that as a way of incubating what they hope will become much larger plans, at which point they
Mhm.
typically switch over to an AUM model.
Got it. So this is it's a great way to kinda groom up and coming, higher net worth clients, get your foot in the door, kinda get the ball rolling
Mhm.
with someone.
Absolutely. And the thing that's surprising too for a lot of advisors is they're finding these ultra high net worth clients in places they would never even consider looking. So, perfect example is In one of my prior companies, I hired, somebody he was still pretty young, just newly retired law enforcement officer. And, working for a government agency, they typically have, really good retirement benefits. And our plan, like doubled in size overnight when he rolled his assets in. And suddenly, like to an advisor, they want to talk to him
Mhm.
because he has like they can do stuff with him. They don't want to talk to somebody, and it's not that they don't want to. It's just there's not a lot they can do to help somebody with just $10,000, in their retirement account. Whereas,
Mhm.
he had 300,000, and he really needed the help of a financial advisor, and a financial advisor's wanting to help somebody like him. And so, it's a great way, if you're not a 401k specialist, to find, to kind of build that pipeline of high net worth individuals. They are small business owners. They're highly compensated individuals in these small business organizations that are, kind of they're overlooked because it's not as glamorous.
Mhm. Got it. So it really, it's adding another level of expertise and another high level, high value service to financial advisors, quiver of arrows, if you will.
Absolutely. And the thing too
Yeah.
is they're going to be coming across to more and more, because it's like with those laws, you could be headquartered. We're in Salt Lake City, Utah. You could be headquartered in Salt Lake, and you hire your first employee in California. You still have to comply with those rules. So you now need to figure something out. And so even if you are an advisor that's not in a state with those mandates, there's a very high likelihood that the clients you're talking to are needing this solution. And so just simply being aware, number one, is beneficial. But we found a lot of, especially newer advisors to the industry, um, they find it hard, when you're young and you're cutting your teeth to go and convince somebody who's making a lot of money to trust you. But they find it easier oftentimes to leverage the 401k to find those individuals. And so we have seen some advisors that, initially were just kind of looking at us, and now like this is the way they build their pipeline. They've set up dozens of plans with us. And, really at the end of the day, they're charging a very reasonable fee on the 401k book of business. And where they're still making the bulk of their income is through the private wealth advising.
Mhm. Awesome. And is this predominantly to be used with business owner clients, or can it be used with any client?
Really anything. So because we have built such a robust platform, we do everything from a solo K. So, sole entrepreneur, and there's a lot of those, especially, being a digital nomad. You could set up a solo K for, a couple $100. The advisor can help them. And now, you're able to put away upwards of 63 grand a year. And, use that. Either you can choose Roth, you can choose how you want that contribution to, be made. And so it's just another tool. It's another way of helping somebody. The one caveat is it can't be W-2 income to set up a solo K. But, even if you're an Uber, driver on the weekend or something like that, you could set up a 401k for yourself and use that as a way of, maximizing what you couldn't do with an IRA.
Hmm. That's awesome. So this is really, on the surface, it's an easier way to get your clients into a 401k, but it's really a marketing tool. Like
Mhm.
this is how financial advisors can tap into, a massive amount of clients that they may not previously have been able to
Yep.
tap into.
Well, it's the ability for the advisor to offer something that the 12 that went before him, can offer. Being on LinkedIn, having, a number of successful businesses and venture backed, I weekly I'm getting, hit up by people who want to help manage my assets or whatever. And there's really nothing unique that any of them have been able to offer. But if you're a financial advisor that says, "Hey, look, I can help you," we can do cash balance combo plans where you can sock away hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, or we can do this. That's something that's really unique. If somebody comes and offers that to me as a small business owner, I realize, okay, this person's speaking my language. They understand, me as a small business owner, what my needs are, versus just the rank and file, wealth advisor that's just pursuing anybody with assets. And so it really does give you kind of a unique way of approaching the industry. And we have a lot of advisors that focus exclusively on dental practices. They come in, they advise those clients, and this is just one of those things where, at some point they're like, you have to set up a 401k, and this is why. And so it becomes a tool that really enables them to, pursue a segment and offer something that's different from everyone
Mm,
else.
mhm. Yeah, that's very difficult to do in this
Mhm.
industry is to differentiate. So that's amazing. Awesome. Anything else to share about 401 Go? It sounds like incredible a benefit to any interested financial advisor out there.
The big thing is, we're looking at there's about 5.5 million small businesses that have employees but do not have a 401k. As I mentioned, roughly half of those will need to set one up just because of, regulatory reasons. And so there's an opportunity there. And quite frankly, the 401k industry, those 401k specialists, it's not big enough to be able to handle all that upcoming demand. And so we have to get more of, those private wealth advisors, uh, you know, broker dealer group advisors, whatever, involved in offering this as a benefit, just because it's the only way we're going to reach all those businesses. And we know that the best outcomes, and we've proven this, over the past 4 or 5 years, that it's the best outcomes for the individuals, for the business, for everyone involved, for us, for the advisors, is the partner based approach. And so, we've really further aligned ourselves in a myriad of ways over the last couple of years to say this is the solution, and we do have an ability to impact the industry.
Hmm. Awesome. And where can our audience find out more about 401 Go?
401go.com. That's the easiest place. And, I try to post regularly on LinkedIn and kind of have some conversations there. So, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Not too hard. But yeah, that's the best way. They can reach out to myself, or, there's a number of contact forms on the website for those advisors to engage with us.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. We have gone way over, so I apologize, but
No
super
worries. It's been
appreciate
fun.
you
Yeah.
you spending time with me. My final question is open ended. You can take it in any direction you like. I think you touched on it a bit in this interview, but I just have to ask it. What are you working towards?
Right now we're trying to realign the industry in some ways, and it's not just 401ks, but just the way that, financial advice, and we're trying to bring financial wellness to the masses, and redefine the way that we do that. Help people earlier in their career, get them, help them establish these behaviors. And so for us, that's the focus. Everything else, the products that we're going to release, our roadmap, the way that we're growing, the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis, all revolve around that idea of wanting to ignite that desire within every working individual to save for their future self, for financial independence, not necessarily retirement as the government would maybe define it.
Hey, amen. And our listeners can find out more about you on LinkedIn, and
Mhm.
is that's the best place? Daniel
Absolutely.
Beck.
Yep. Daniel Beck. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. Supremely enjoyed this on so many levels.
Likewise. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And to our listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in. Keep on growing out there, everybody. See.